to the D to the B to the A to the N to the D to the B to the A to the N to the D to the B to the A to the N to the D to the B to the A to the N to the D to the.
All right, so we went through the layouts and all that. Let's talk about the routing. Nothing super crazy, but we're going to go over inputs, groups, mains, matrices, and how I use them in this show file specifically. Again, and I'm pretty sure I said this at the previous episode, which I believe is now going to be one episode. This is not a everybody should do this thing. This is just a I do it this way, and this is how I did it for this show. All right, so first of all, input channels, lots of them, right? Let's start with just the basic VCAs so you can understand what's going on there. We've got the whole drum kit. I believe you can see it above me. All the stuff in red. Kick in, kick out, snare bottom, or snare top, snare bottom, blah, 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 all that. All of this stuff goes into a band VCA. I just said the drum kit because it's obvious to see right there. When I move this band VCA up and down, you should be able to hear it. And not. So you can see the fader on the screen, you can hear it. You'll notice there are these little ghost faders on the screen up there. The first 7 inputs there you'll see don't have this little ghost fader on them. And it's because they're actually not assigned to this band VCA. This band VCA only has everything that is going straight to left, right in it. And the reason there is that I want to maintain the ratio and relationship of all the faders against one another. So this fader ultimately brings up everything the same amount or everything back the same amount, right? So the kicks and snares, they go to groups. So this band VCA has that group in them. So you'll see down here we've got kick, snare, and drums groups in there. So if I jump over to groups, you'll see that group, kick, snare, drums, and even bass go up and down as we move this VCA. Again, the idea there is that VCA only affects the stuff that's actually routed to left, right. So kick here, if you look in the bus assign area over there, you'll see goes to a kick group, snare group, snare group, snare group, snare group, etc. These aren't actually routed to left, right, whereas the groups themselves, they are. So again, that band VCA pulls up and pulls down only stuff that's actually hitting left, right. It's probably some more confusing things in here, but we'll get to those. Okay. So we've got band VCA. Now we've got, again, we're back to kick drum. You can see here it's routed to a group. It goes to kick group goes to left, right. Reasoning there is, for the most part, once I've got a relationship between the kick in and kick out that I kind of like, I like doing the rest of the EQ and such on the group. It's actually a little bit better to my ears for the coherence between the microphones. If I've already kind of sorted that out, and then I start doing EQ changes here, it seems to sound better for me. Whereas if I start making EQ changes on the other end, the coherence between the microphones might get a little bit wonky because every time you make an EQ change, you kind of futz with phase a little bit. Additionally, the compression on the kick drum happens here. So impact on the kick happens here. Same thing for snare. Snare, all my snare mics, they meet up here. You'll see snare top, snare bottom, snare 2, top, bottom, as well as snare reverbs. And snare pink we can get to later. And here's where compression happens as well. So some drums hit that. Then we've got some drums that kind of do a little parallel path here. So you'll see tom 1 hits left, right, and also hits der, ms. Der, ms is basically me being a little bit stupid, and that's drums if you read them next to each other. And that's a little bit of a holdover from a profile show file I had used a long time ago where you actually had to have 2 separate groups and you link them. But one of the nice and neat things about this is that they both have separate mono plugins for compression on them, which kind of gives you a unlinked widening effect of the plugins. All right, bass. Bass also has a group. Inside of this, you got bass DI, bass sub, bass synth, and they all feed this bass group. Bass group goes out to mains. Vocals. This vocal group is everything, everything vocals. It's the microphones themselves, it's the effects that go with those microphones, and all of that. So, you'll also notice that there's 3 vocal groups. There's vocal group 1, 2, and 3. All 3 have exactly the same EQ curve. I realize that EQ curve looks really extreme, but it sounds good. It is kind of extreme, I'll admit, it is. But every time I've kind of gone through and redone it, I've ended up pretty close to that same spot. All 3 of these vocal groups have exactly the same EQ setting on them. And ultimately the reason there is that I found that when the vocal EQs are a little different in each group, the kind of phasiness of the EQs themselves kind of make a bit of a mess when they merge. If they all have exactly the same EQ, they kind of merge a little bit smoother. You will see they all have 3 different plugins though. This has got impact on it, this has got overdrive pedal on it, and this has got real tape saturation. And it's really just a kind of parallel thickening thing. All right, then we've got a group called Direct to Matrix. You can see inside of this, we've got iPod, oscillator, playback, loopback, and smart. And the reason for this one is anything that we want to get out to our PA, but not have affected by any sort of left-right processing. If I've got a bus compressor on my left-right, I don't want my iPod to hit it. If I've got EQ on my left-right, maybe just something for taste, I don't want iPod or smart or pink noise or any of those types of things to hit it. And I've got this play and this loopback thing. My loopback is my playback of my band only or full mix recording of previous shows. I don't want that to then go again through master bus recording if what I'm doing is listening to that recorded stereo stem. So that's what this guy's for. This guy routes straight to PA. Then I got a keys group and I got a tracks group. And you'll see inside of the keys group, each of the individual elements is only routed to keys, not to left-right as well. And then the keys group itself is routed to left-right. Same with the tracks group. We've got percussion, fill, lead, BVs, sub, all routed to tracks, and then tracks themselves is routed to left-right. Just gives me a little bit more control. And there's actually been 1 or 2 scenarios where we swapped out a musician in the middle of a tour, and we needed someone new to learn the keys part. Having this keys group meant that on the show previous, I could just hit record on the keys group in addition to the whole multi-track, and I've got a full key stem that I can send to that guy. So I can send him a band mix, and I can send him the key stem. He can throw them both right next to each other in some DAW, learn his parts. Same kind of thing for the tracks. I've had 1 or 2 scenarios where it was nice to be able to go back to tracks as a mix, as a whole, and go, oh yeah, this is the bit that's poking out. And then I can kind of go back and look at the individual stems and figure it out. Okay, so that's the groups. Let's hit matrices. All right, this is typically my main PA matrix. In the context of this gig, it's a little bit different because right now, first of all, this is kind of feeding recordings and stuff like that, but this EQ right here, this tiny little bit of curve here, was what was on the main PA in the venue we were in. But there was only maybe 8 people in the crowd. And those 8 people in the crowd weren't allowed to make noise because we were doing a live stream. But they were VIPs, so I had to make sure the PA was on for them. So this matrix is fed from left, right, all the vocal groups, and also direct to matrix. We can ignore the talk back front house that's in there because that's just part of making this video. So what's nice about having this separate here is I've got left, right, vocals, and the direct to matrix. And I can choose how much of which of these go where. So you can see in this example, my vocal groups are actually down by 6 dB from my left, right. On a normal gig, they're all set at the same level, and that's because we've got a huge crowd of a bunch of people screaming, right? And if they're screaming, for this gig, it's most important that Jess's vocal sits right on top. So having her vocals sitting right on top, puts it to +6. In this room that we were doing this gig in, there was only a handful of VIPs, so I didn't need to bump the vocal way up top. tucked it right back in, and I ended up with this kind of matrix relationship. And this is what I'm listening to through the PA2. Sub matrix, you can see it's the same feeds, but all the vocals off, so there's no vocal feeding the sub whatsoever. Sub is also a mono send, so it's -6. Front fill, you can see they're also separately fed. Left, right, vocal, vocal, vocal. What's cool about having it set up this way is that if I need to, I can bump the vocal in the front fill if I have to. I can pull it down, I can do all sorts of things, whatever it is I really need, but it is convenient to be able to take the vocal up just by a couple dB in the front fill only. Record feed, pretty much the same as the PA feed here, except you can see my talkback front of house is also feeding it so that you guys can hear it. I have a mono as well. Sometimes you need this. Smart feed. Room feed. This one, I believe, was when we were doing the rehearsal for this gig. I sent this back into the room through the PA in the room. So the channel EQ is there just to kind of clean that up a little bit. Then we've got talks. This one is fed from all the talkbacks that come from stage. And normally, this actually tracks the volume of the show. While the show's happening, this talk matrix goes up and down, and this is what feeds my shout box. These ones are cool ones, mains band and mains vocal. Really easy to set up if you've done your vocal on left-right kind of in this kind of way, or if you can do bus-to-bus routing, which you can in this software now, but when I did this gig, we didn't have this yet. So here, this is the band only. You can see left-right is feeding it, and all the vocals are off in it. In this guy, we've got vocals only. Sometimes this can be pretty useful. Every once in a while I get asked, hey, can I get an instrumental mix of this? And actually, considering now we're in, pandemic times and everyone's trying to do streaming, it was insanely helpful that I had instrumental mixes of every show we had done. So this mains band matrix, I record every day. Same with this mains vocal matrix, I record every day. For the most part, no one's going to say, hey, can I get a vocal only stem? But every once in a while, 10 minutes after a show, 5 minutes after a show's over, someone says, hey, I need this one song right now. And having this mains vocal and the mains band as two separate recorded things allows me to merge them really quickly. And as you saw earlier, in the PA, the vocals can be kind of hot. So if I need to give this to someone who's maybe it's going to be a TV broadcast, maybe it's a news thing that was covering in the first couple songs or whatever, I might want to take that vocal, trim it down a couple dB, and then just merge them. Or if we had the song they want, maybe there was just one really gnarly note, or I don't know, a microphone got dropped, or whatever it may be, I can make that edit real quick in Pro Tools and then just export it. And at that point, it takes me seconds or at most minutes to just print them a new version of this mix. Or even if it needs, I don't know, some mastering to make it work for whatever environment they're trying to put it on, I can just put that on in Pro Tools, make this stem mix, and bounce it out without having to come back to the console, without having to rebuild the mix or anything like that. And I can do it in, years later if I need to. So that's the gist of that. Let's talk about VCAs real quick. I know we mentioned the drum VCA and we mentioned the band VCA. Band VCA, everything that feeds left-right. Drum VCA, basically everything in the drums, except even this, we're ignoring the kick-in mic to kick-out mic, snare top, snare bottom. Instead, we're picking off those groups because we want this to bring the entire drum relationship up and down as a group. Bass VCA doesn't really have to exist. You can see up here that there's just a bass group in it. But I had it. Keys VCA, so this keys VCA is everything feeding into the group. If the keys group had a compressor on it, I'd be able to drive into the group and have the compressor kind of push harder, or I could pull it back. Same for tracks, same kind of story. Guitar, on this particular gig, we only had one guitar player, so it didn't really matter. But on some of the others, we have multiple. Vocal VCA, this one's a little bit different, only because it's got her vocals, but it also has all of her effects returns. So if I take that down, all the vocal effects go away, in addition to the vocal itself going away. It's a little bit funny of a relationship because most of her vocal effects are post-fader, so if we are pushing her vocal up and down, in theory we're also pushing the sends into these effects up and down. So by pulling this VCA down or up, we're either doubling or having, the relationship. We're kind of screwing with the relationship between the vocal send and the vocal return there. So doing it that way, probably not a good idea. But this vocal VCA stays at 0 99.9% of the time. And I hadn't spent the time to really go through figuring this shit out. Instead, I actually ride her actual vocal, and since all the sends are post-fade, if I pull down her vocal, I'm gravy. So yeah, this VCA isn't actually even on my show layout because I don't use it. It's just there just in case. So now let's jump to the band. As I mentioned before, this is everything, including effects returns, all sorts of stuff, but it's everything that's feeding left-right, basically. Effects. This effects VCA is all the vocal effects, basically. All the vocal effects except for one. You'll see that this does not have the vocal room in it. This one does. And the reason is that this VCA gets used when she's talking. If she's talking during a show, I'll pull this down so we don't get all this extra reverb and larger-than-life sounding stuff. But I like leaving the room on her vocal because it's what makes it seem natural, as opposed to just being an absolutely dry vocal mic, which I don't like the sound of. There's a little bit of room on there, and when I pull this down, we don't lose that. So she still feels a little bit more natural, even though all the extra effects have all gone away. And that's the gist. Yeah, that's all the routing and all the grouping. And next time we jump through this, we're going to actually listen to stuff. I mean, we can listen to stuff now, too. Yeah. All right, catch you on the next one, I guess.